when this says God does not want me to suffer, it's saying it doesn't want you to sit there in pain and suffering and depression and anger and fear. But it says for you not to sit in those things, you have to change your perspective about God and your perspective about you. Now, just the other day, I got one of our listeners, Jack in New Jersey, and I didn't have a chance to answer Jack in New Jersey's question for the last couple of weeks because I forgot, Jack. Sorry about that. And he was nice enough to say, okay. And I said I was going to answer his question the following week, and then I forgot the following week, but Jack is like Jesus, 70 times 7. He's going to forgive me. But it's a question that, is kind of goes along with this because it says, I wanted to know your concept of what God is. And if she could briefly explain the differentiation in the course of God, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and how those are used in 3 practical ways, kind of like on the Holy Trinity. Well, that's a big question, but I'm going to make it real simple. Because the Course doesn't talk a lot about the Trinity, but it does talk about a few places in there. And it says that God would be the first person in the Trinity. God is the creator. And he's the source of all being from the Course's perspective. He is our Father, but only because we are his creation. So we give him fatherhood or creatorhood by being his creations. And the Course would say he is the cause and we are the effect. And that his essence is not a man, but a spirit. It's just spirit. And that is what we are. And that knowing of that spirit, that one with that spirit, is what heaven is. Now, that's basically what the Course would say. So from this perspective, we were creations of God, our cause, we're the effect. So he can create nothing unlike himself. So how could he have a creation that was not just as loving or just as healing and just as peace-filled as him, right? He could not. And the same is true if you go to Christianity. We are an extension, a creation of God. How could we be any different than that? So if we can remember that there is no difference between us and God, then we can realize that his will for us would not be pain and suffering. His will would be only love. And that's what we need to focus on. God wills that we be saved from any of the pain and suffering, not just because he's a benevolent guy, but because he can give nothing other than what he was created with, love. And if we are his creations, then that's the truth about us. And when we align ourselves with that truth, we know who we are. And when we know who we are, the Course would say that is heaven. Now, it says what's happened to us is that the Son of God, us, we've fallen asleep to that reality. We don't know we're imbued with only what God is. We think we've made a mess of things. We think we've separated from him in some way. We feel separated from him in some way. And so now the Course would say, we are the cause and the world is the effect. In our separated thinking, we've become the cause of the world. Now, even in our separated thinking, we don't believe we're the cause of the world, do we? Even though from the Course's perspective, this world is in our own minds. That's the law of seeing. What I see out there comes from what I first look within to see. But we don't believe that. We think now the world is creating us. It's happening to us. You've got no power over the world. But that's the big lie of the ego. You are the cause of this world, and the world is your effect. If you don't like the world you're experiencing, it's time for us to reassume our power. In essence, remember who we are. Let me remember I am one with God. Let me remember my truth. Let me remember I am one with God. And what is God's will for me? Attack, judgment, pain, suffering? No, happiness, love, peace. We know that, right? You want to correct me, which is great because you never talk to me about that. But thank you guys. You need to, that is the truth, right? So if that's the truth, and that's what we have to be living as us. We need to be living love and happiness and peace. Why would we live anything other than that? But do we? Yeah, we get very locked into our ego. We get locked, but our ego is what? From the Course's perspective, just a mistaken thought. It's just a thought. It has no more power over you than a thought. And yet, a thought has a lot of power over us. We believe in things. I remember seeing one of those America's Funniest Home videos about, it was like in the Midwest or something, where they had those glass screen doors in Oregon, we used to have glass screen doors in the wintertime to keep the cold out. You'd put the glass up, and then in the summertime, you'd put the screen up on the screen door so it would go in. Well, this dog knew that there was a glass door there. And so when the guy took it out and he walked through the door without opening it, then the dog would not go through until he opened the door to go around it, because in the dog's mind, that glass was still there. Even though the guy would walk in and out of the door without opening it, the dog still believed that the glass door was there. So he would not go through it until the owner opened up the door. So that was what was so funny. The dog knew you can't go through that. Even though he was being shown by the owner, you certainly could. He was so trained in that. This is us. You're talking about the ego. You're right, but we're so trained in the ego. That's why the Course says we have a lot of ancient thinking about who God is and who we are, about what rules us and what we have no power over. So it's time for us to relearn. And you might say, to remember that I am one with God. And you might say, that's going to take a long time. We've got a lot of ancient thinking. Then how are we going to get through it? Because the lie is harder to learn. The truth, it says, is much easier. That's where a miracle comes into collapse time. Because it's the truth about you. You were never evil. You were never sinful. You were never hateful. You were only love. So it's time for us to remember and begin to focus on, let me remember the love of God within me now. Let me remember that. And the memory of that collapses time. It helps us to awaken faster. Those moments of quiet that we spend in that memory heals us and heals the world. The Course is constantly telling us, you don't do this for just yourself, because there's not just you here. You think you're a separate body, but that's just another illusion of the ego. You share a collective consciousness that's so much farther beyond our understanding than we can get to. But it's telling us to just be willing to suspend judgment for a moment. I remember when I was learning difficult mathematical concepts, and you'd go, I don't get that. And a teacher would always say, don't worry, you will. And what would happen? You would understand it, because that teacher had faith in you and had taught before and knew that it would all work. And it will. The same thing is true here. This might be even beyond our understanding. Again, I have no idea still how my oven works, but I know and have faith that when I put something in there at 350 for 45 minutes, it's going to cook. I have faith in that. The same thing is true for God. It's going to work because it cannot help but work.